Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of Freebird. Today, I have one of my dear friends on the show, and I can't wait to share her with you. Suranjana Ghosh is a marketing and communication specialist based in Mumbai, India. And in a career that has spanned over 18 years, she has worked in a diverse segment of industries, starting from hair color to breakfast cereals to news media and, of course, the development sector, including brand names like L'Oreal, BBC, CNBC TV 18, and Kellogg's. Beyond the titles and the acclaim and the professional success that she's had, she is one of my soul sisters, and I am always learning from her. The lessons that Suranjana has taught me have been about finding opportunity in adversity and being resilient no matter what life throws at you. Hi, Suranjana, and welcome to the show. I'm a bit nervous of having someone like you, but I hope that we'll have a really enriching conversation today and share such a beautiful story.
Thank you, Sneh. It's fantastic to be here with you. Thank you for having me on Freebird. I've been watching Freebird with great interest for the last couple of weeks, and I think it's a fantastic initiative that you're doing. We all have so much to learn from everybody's shared human experiences, and the fact that you've chosen to do something like this, I think, is fantastic. We all get to learn. We all get to actually share our own learning journeys with more people. So, thank you once again.
Thank you, Sue. Sue, you have persevered through some of what I would consider life's greatest challenges, stormy weathers, call it. And I think that your story is a very inspirational story. Would you tell us how this Suranjana emerged from all these battles and real, I would say, tests that life put her through?
Right. Thank you, first of all, for calling it an inspiring journey. Honestly, when we all live our lives, we all have our own fair share of successes as well as challenges. And when you are in the middle of stormy seas, I don't think you even realize the potential you have to overcome it and what it's teaching you while you're going through it. And it's only in retrospect when you kind of look back at what you've been through or the kind of adversities that you've been able to overcome is when you realize, oh my God, that's the same person. This is me who actually faced something that at one point in time would have been so formidable, so daunting. I wouldn't even have known how to get around the issue at one point in time. But not only did I do it, but I circumvented it, and I'm now able to look at it from a certain distance and say, wow, it was really probably a trial by fire at some point in time, but it's only made me stronger. And use a cliche, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And I think if we speak of some of the challenges that I've faced, I can pretty much categorize them, from, let's say, my health issues, which started fairly early on in my life when I was 18, moving on to various issues that I faced thereafter, um, and also relationship issues, which are not foreign to anybody. I think we've all gone through, we all continue to go through them, and they're all learning blocks for us. So, if I can just kind of summarize what the health experience has been like, because I was 18 when I was diagnosed with a form of bone cancer, and I went through 4 years of treatment for it, whether it was chemotherapy or 3 surgeries where we tried to save my leg. The tumor was on the knee. Um, and having to learn to walk after each of these surgeries, pretty much again, being back to, being back at square one, relearning something as basic and fundamental as, walking again from scratch, being dependent on people for every little thing, because you're suddenly confined to a bed. You're also watching all your peers who are 18 and 19 living a very full life. And I didn't even know when I was going to be able to get back to college. Was I ever going to be able to have the same kind of track that everybody else's life was following? And I think in those 3 or 4 years, which finally culminated in my opting for an amputation. So I'm an above knee amputee. I don't have my left leg. I haven't had it since the age of 22, and that's 22 years now. I think it's been a very big learning experience for me, which is what I look at it. It continues to be a learning experience. And I truly believe that this happened to me for a reason. I could have been living my life pretty much on the surface, um, decent grades, decent level of ambition, and it would have been a very, I would say, cliched formulaic life. When you're 18 and you've been completely thrown off kilter, uh, and life is not really in your control, you realize you're not following anybody else's template but your own. And so, also looking at anybody else and feeling like you've been left behind doesn't work. And I think I learned that very early in life that my journey was my own, and I could have been a little ahead or a little behind some more people, but how I choose to actually navigate that journey um, is really my story. And I could always look at it as, I wouldn't really know how to classify a glass as whether it's half empty or half full. But even when it's empty, you have the potential to fill it. And even when it's half full, you still have something to go on with.
What
And I
were
think that really,
what were the things that kind of gave you that perspective? Because I know that you were in one of India's most acclaimed fashion design institutes, NIFT, and you know it's such a shift. It calls for such a pivot in your mental kind of outlook and perspective to life. So were they? I mean, could you talk to what were those things that kind of helped you change your perspective, or are you an eternal optimist?
well, I do have optimism built into my genetic code, I think, thanks to my mother.
Yeah,
My mother is extremely resilient,
yeah.
very, very positive. And I honestly would not have made it through a few years of extreme bleakness, of being hospitalized again and again, and not really having any clear path ahead of me. There really was no clarity between the age of 18 to 22 of what my life was going to be like.
Hmm.
Because it literally went from chemotherapy to chemotherapy or surgery to surgery. But I think a few things really have helped. Being in cancer wards and watching children much younger than myself who aren't able to go to school and who are battling really grave cancers, and who may never actually get to even be as old as I was, which was 18 at that point in time. I think that gave me a very valuable perspective on what I had already enjoyed. And rather than feeling um, martyred or persecuted by my fate and my destiny, because typically every cancer diagnosis is usually followed by disbelief and a whole why me kind of
Sure,
situation. And I
sure.
think I was able to pivot really from there and say, okay, if it is me, I do know that I've been fairly fortunate to have made it this far without any ill health. And now that this is the situation, what can I do next?
Hmm.
And soon after my amputation, I had consulted a very senior orthopedic surgeon at Vellore, and he was in Chennai, which is where my surgery happened. And I remember him saying one thing to me, which has stayed with me all my life. And he said, the number of things you can do will always outnumber what you can't do,
That's
even if you've now
amazing.
lost your leg.
That's amazing.
And Sneha, I tell you, I mean, I have held on to that, and it's not like it's something that I've written and I've put it up somewhere where I can see it every day, but it really is emblazoned in my psyche and my memory, and I think I have, so far at least, tried to live my life as a testament to that.
Sure.
And so it is a few of these experiences. I think the kind of things that people have said to me, um, very often even negative experiences of how I was perceived when I didn't have my hair uh, due to the chemotherapy, or because I had a huge caliper and I used to walk with a really bad limp, or the very visible disability of not having a leg. And many of these experiences have been traumatic, to say the least. The lack of empathy that I've encountered many, many times, I think, has built a level of resilience and a level of, I like to call it a layer of steel.
Yeah.
So it often obviously also makes me come across as somebody who's not very open to new people, but that's also because it's ended up being a bit of a defense or a coping mechanism because I don't like being judged for a disability alone. I am somebody who's multidimensional, and the disability is something that came my way and is a part of my identity. And it is not entirely who I am.
See, while you
And
said that, I, you have said this once to me, and I just find it so hard to believe because the woman I know and I see and I've met is someone who may have had or may have an armor because, we do go through life meeting all kinds of different people and we do need that armor to protect ourselves, but I've always found that you've had a very compassionate heart and that your ability to relate to others is definitely a sign of having a very porous armor and not one that is impregnable.
no, thank you for saying that. I think you're absolutely right. Um, Without that level of compassion or empathy, as I like to call it, I would be poorer for all the experiences I've been through. And being mindful of other people's situations, because I have an ability now to know what pain feels like firsthand,
Yeah.
what it feels like to live with changed circumstances, brings a level of understanding which I think not every time is possible for you to trot out that level of vulnerability and empathy. But yes, that is pretty much an operating system that's also built in. And whether that's in situations at work, whether that's in personal situations, it is pretty much what makes me who I am again. Um, and I think a key part of losing my leg actually added a very integral component to my identity.
Wow.
Whether it is in terms of feeling complete physically
Wow.
while missing a huge big part of my body, learning how to cope with altered opinions and perceptions of myself, and actually really understanding and living that if I don't think of myself as complete, I can really not expect the rest of the world also to look at me as somebody complete.
That's amazing.
Neither can you,
Mm.
thank you, and neither can you expect somebody else to fill in the blanks of what you feel is missing in you. And while I may never be the kind of amputee who scales Mount Everest, and I truly live in deep admiration of amputees who are able to really push their physical boundaries, I think I found my calling when a few years back I was harassed at airport security in an Indian airport, and it deeply upset me and it deeply distressed me because I had lost my leg, but I hadn't lost my right to dignity. And to be asked to remove an entire prosthetic leg in front of people where there really isn't much privacy in airport security screening, and to be asked to put that leg into the baggage x-ray where everybody else's, laptops and handbags are, was very upsetting. But I also realized that this was not an issue that anybody realized is an issue. Because it seemed to be the problem of one, it was the problem of none, really. And I took to social media. This was in 2013, so about 7 years back. And I think I poured my heart out with what it's like to be disabled, what it's like to be asked to remove this leg, what I'm reduced to looking like physically if you ask me to remove the leg in a public place. And I think that visual illustration of what that journey looks like, what that scenario looks like, really helped get attention. And I also realized I wasn't alone. So there's strength in numbers. And I think if you stay, and this is true of not just this issue that I face, but of many things that we all go through in our lives. I think if we hold on to what's bothering us and we get into this little space of our own where we feel that what we are going through is unique and nothing can help us get out of it, I think all you need to do is really build the courage to see if your voice can reach somebody else. And I promise you, it may not be a groundswell of 100 people replying. It may even just be one person or two people, but it will reach the ears, of people who can help you and to whom it matters. And in my case, I came across many other people with disabilities who had faced similar issues. And because everybody was doing, individual efforts, and the government would reply individually to most people, it hadn't ever really become a well-strung awareness campaign, if you want to call it that. And so we worked very closely, a few of us from the disability fraternity, um, with a couple of government agencies that look after security. And this is something that is non-negotiable. You don't want to fly
Mm.
feeling unsafe or compromising the safety of other people who are flying. So it is a very delicate and a highly sensitive issue that you simply don't want to you know take a risk with. So I
Right.
think we worked on seeing what other countries in the world were doing and developed a standard operating procedure. And till
Wow.
date, I happen to work with the CISF as an advisor in terms of whether we're being treated right. How can the staff actually make our travel easier for us? What are the kind of things we need to be sensitized about? And this particular experience, I think, Sneh, was where I came to a point where I had to own up to my disability being a very strong part of my identity. Because if I wanted certain things to change for people with disabilities, I couldn't expect someone external to understand and change things for me if I didn't speak up for myself. And by way of doing that, also actually speaking for many other people who may not have had the opportunity or the platforms that I had access to. And in
Interesting that
finally,
you say that. Yeah, sorry, Sue. I find that interesting that you say that because a lot of times when we go through hardships, all right, and this could be anyone, anywhere watching this, we tend to shy away and maybe because whether it's mental health, whether it's disability, whether it's personal crises, there is a sense of, especially in our community, I would say, or maybe not, there's a sense of guilt, shame, what could you have done, blah, the storyline. And I think uh, with every one person that stands up and speaks their truth, you actually make it easier for maybe someone else to accept themselves. I'm just wondering if this comes naturally to you, speaking your truth and being vocal and authentic, or have there been like processes that you have gone through, coached yourself? Because I'm sure that that could benefit a lot of people even today, who might be looking at a situation maybe that's being caused by COVID or something, and they're saying that they really can't do anything about it, whereas the truth might be that just by speaking up they can. So can you speak to that, Suranjana?
so I think speaking my truth is something that comes fairly naturally to me, and from a very early age in my life.
Hmm.
I've always been empowered both by parents and early mentors, like some of my um, junior school, middle school teachers, who I think always encouraged the spark they saw in me and made me feel like
Oh,
it was a safe space to speak.
yes,
That's something, of course, that we kind of tend to lose as we grow older because the safe spaces dwindle.
absolutely,
Um, the filters have to come into place
absolutely,
because you do realize everything that you utter, while you may feel that you're speaking your truth, but it also has a repercussion on other people many times.
yes.
So it is a balance. And I think uh, the only coaching that I think would be of use is to understand the audience and to understand the intent and the outcome. Um, one thing is for certain, if you are speaking with the voice of authenticity and you own this, there's precious little that people can do to heckle you or bring you down. Detractors will always be there. And I
Mm.
think when I started out with this in 2013, I did get a lot of flack from, and I was trolled a lot, made
Wow.
me actually go off Twitter for a while. I'm still a very, I would say, a very under the radar presence on something as open as Twitter. And it really worried me and scared me to see the kind of hostile reactions I was getting. I mean, some of the more kosher ones that I can speak about are it's a first world problem in a first world, in a third world country, sorry.
Wow. Yeah.
Or she clearly looks like she can afford a very expensive prosthetic leg, so what's her problem with being asked to remove it? Or she's clearly a marketing person who's out to get her 5 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
And far worse, which is, typically on Twitter, it goes on to threats of bodily harm, and of course it went that way too. Um, but what I'd like to say over here is that you need to then shut out the naysayers, because clearly these are people who are never going to engage with an issue like this in their personal lives. and hence they're unable to probably open up their imagination as well to understanding what it's like. And expecting empathy from all 100 people that you come across is clearly not going to work. But if that empathy, like I said even a little while earlier, or that empathy or that call for help reaches the right ears, and you use this in, like I said, a voice of authenticity, wanting to work with logic,
Yeah.
I do feel that that really helps. And built in with dignity, with asking for what you're asking for with dignity and honesty, um, gracefully accepting if something really is not going to change, and just live with the knowledge that you still gave it your best shot. I mean, had the SOP not changed, I would still know, Sneh, that I was not going to be boarding every flight with a mix of trepidation and anger at my circumstances, because I knew that I had tried my level best to mainstream this issue, to build awareness about this issue, even if it is a very small percentile of people with disability who travel by
Yeah.
air. But that still doesn't mean that it's a problem that didn't need to be worked on.
Absolutely. And I mean, I genuinely believe that, if we just take the conversation a little bit to the spiritual side, that, if there are waters and if there are mountains that were given to us to climb, it's also because we are to kind of climb them and then be able to tell people how we did. So I know it's a romanticized view of something, but I genuinely do believe that. And there is power in that. There is power in rising from your circumstances. So really encouraging to see the work you're doing. So I also know this about you, that I don't know whether it was in 2012 or 13 that you ran the Mumbai Marathon to raise money.
Yeah, so I can't run, I walk, but yes, I did participate in the Mumbai Marathon a couple of years to raise funds, again, for non-profits that work with
True, you haven't seen
youth.
me jogging around here. You would have probably said the same. Say, why don't you just walk? Not to belittle it, but just to kind of,
No,
tell.
I'd rather be truthful and say I can't run, because there definitely are amputees who run. I don't have one of those fancy legs,
Yeah,
but I can, yes, trot up a decent amount of mileage,
yeah.
with like a gentle jog.
I saw that.
And yes, so I have raised funds for a couple of nonprofits that work with youth from underprivileged backgrounds with disabilities. So
That's amazing.
it's basically kids who really need these opportunities a little more than other kids from underprivileged backgrounds. And this is before I actually made the switch from a corporate job to one in the development sector. And I think the fantastic amount of goodwill that I generated through the kind of fundraising efforts that I did, and I personally felt that that little bit of work that I did really made a lot of difference.
I don't
Um,
think it was so little. I remember seeing it and thinking, this is literally the narrative. My next question to you was, how do you kind of, because I see someone and like you, and I feel like you are speaking your truth, you are authentic, you are an original as far as originality goes, and you are living a very full and rich life. I mean, one only has to see the kind of pictures you take on your Instagram to know that you are inspired by beauty. There is a lot of life within you. And talking about the Mumbai Marathon, it's not like even your personal health circumstances stopped you from even doing something like that. So I would like to ask you, what's your definition of living a full and a rich life? Because for most of us, it's like job, home, whatever.
Well, first of all, I think you've thank you so much for saying these really wonderful words about me, because it it's it's very heartening to hear that you're perceived as this person. Um, because while I go through the experiences that I do, and that's true of all of us, we don't ever really pause to acknowledge ourselves quite as much as we should. And I
Absolutely.
think, because you also use the word compassion, I think compassion really begins with our own selves. And so for me, the key to leading a fulfilling life, and I'm no different from anybody else, my job, my career, my financial security, my home, my personal goals, they all matter to me as well. But I think more than the designations, and yes, of course, the pay is important. But beyond even that, I think being able to live your truth, uh, being able to take a courageous stance against things that are not working out. And again, because you use this beautiful analogy of the seas and the mountains, you don't really ever cross a stormy sea by yourself or ever really scale a mountain by yourself. I've always had people who've come into my life at the right time, and they've been very, very supportive in whatever way they could at that point in time. And one can't discount, uh, their contribution. And of course, there have been constants like my parents. My father's no more, but till date, I think the resilience and optimism that my mother has taught me through her own example is something that keeps me on my path. Um, and more than anything else, I think starting with compassion and kindness to yourself, not beating yourself up for things that you feel you could have done better or you shouldn't have done, is a first step. Forgiving yourself for a lot of things is a constant work in progress. When I say this, it's not like I'm an ace or a master at it. I'm
Yeah.
still learning how
All
to do
work in
this.
progress. We're all works in
Completely.
progress. Yeah. Mm.
Completely. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Of course it does. And I think, more so because even for myself, and I said this on another interview lately, that, you know, um, while we were growing up as, Indian girls in the 90s, let's say, you know, we were always told that, you have to kind of be good at your studies and be outspoken and do all these different things. And so we went on this journey to kind of be great at marketing or get a career sorted, and all of that. And we had, at least I can speak for myself, that we had these fixed notions of what success looked like,
yes,
right? And I think it's for probably the first time in my life that I am questioning that. And I'm seeing, okay, that's great. I mean, these are the things that make you feel more empowered. Great. A car gets you from point A to B. That's great. But really, where it really counts, and I do see that there is a shift in consciousness, even amongst women of our generation, that where we are all kind of questioning what it really means to be Indian, be independent, be a woman of this generation. So I do see that. I do see that a lot, you know, and it is something that I think we all should stand up and do, because there is a generation. I mean, whatever comes out of COVID, there is a generation of women out there that need these kind of stories, so that they are not conformed into the same roles that society has demanded them to play all this while. Uh, so
that's
now that,
interesting that you say that.
yeah,
Actually, sorry, you were saying
yeah.
something.
So
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, please, Suranjana. Yes.
It's interesting that you say that because I think even when I was growing up, and similar to what you said, there were very fixed notions of if you were going to do well in your career, what you ideally should be doing. And
Right.
definitely, I mean, not doing well in your career was not an option.
No.
And I think a lot of that competitiveness or whatever was also self-programmed. And also the idea of what success should look like is also the great job, the perfect marriage,
Absolutely.
probably children. It's a formula and a template that I have seen through my own personal life. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you've just got to gracefully accept it. Pick up whatever learnings you can along that journey as well, and move on. And
I know.
it's okay if it doesn't follow a formula, but the world is changing, and for Indian women especially, you can still be, a fantastic daughter. You can still be a fantastic nurturer, and I do believe that the opportunities for living a life that's outside of the standard box is definitely opening up.
Absolutely. And, I also say this because, during the COVID times, I've had very interesting conversations with my own mom and, a lot of other aunties, let's put it, where, it was like, oh, if you had a child right now, you would have been so busy and, life would have been like, nothing has changed or whatever. And I was like, yeah, but that's not really my truth. And that's not really the path that I've chosen. Not that I'm
Yeah.
not great. I have the best maternal instincts. You should just see me with my cat. but it's just a path that we've chosen. And I think more and more, I think it's important, like I said, for women to speak about these things, because you know um, it should be a conscious choice. It shouldn't be something that has been formulately, like you said, given to you and said, this is the road that you have to now walk, right?
And also milestones. Like you're not supposed to be hitting each one of those at a certain age. And if you don't, then you've basically goofed up or like, you're
Absolutely.
a failure. You will do things at your own pace and it's perfectly all right. And it's
Absolutely.
totally all right if you don't even do those things.
I know. So speaking of milestones, Suranjana, now that we are on your 18th birthday,
Ah, right.
uh, happy 18th birthday, Suranjana. I wanted to
Thank you,
ask
Faith.
you, I wanted to ask you, you know, what, it's a heavy question. I mean, what do you kind of see as your contribution to the world? Not that frankly, the kind of stuff you've already achieved, girl. I mean, people kind of take a lifetime to do, or maybe don't even do it. So I'm just curious to know what more is in store for all of us sitting on the other side and watching you.
Well, speaking of milestones, I think I've learned a lot from two of these, and one, of course, I've spoken at length on during this interview, which is obviously the cancer treatment and the amputation in my life thereafter, and also juggling a career while one is going through all of this. And I think the second most, I would say, defining experience in my life in more recent years uh, has been my divorce. So again, because we were speaking about milestones for Indian women, I didn't get married in my 20s. I got married in my mid 30s. And again, I think if I had a notion of getting married to somebody by a certain age, that didn't happen.
Right.
Um, and again, there is a learning there that a relationship, no matter how short, uh, but the level of learning that I've learned from that I've had, from the person I was married to, and even in letting go of that, the analogy that I have is of my amputation. Any situation in my life that is toxic and which really brings me down, I look at it from the lens of the morning that I took the decision to go ahead with the amputation. I really didn't know what my life was going to be like. We didn't have this much information online back then. And it only was what my gut told me that you either have a few months to live or you can get rid of this leg right now and see what lies ahead. And that's literally true of everything. So the decision to get a divorce by mutual consent because things weren't working out, um, or in, let's say, work situations to walk away from a job that one has invested oneself in.
Yeah.
I think what I can look forward to doing and still continuing to give, if that's the right word in this context, is to encourage people to have the courage to persevere, to find your resilience at the time when you feel that you just absolutely cannot go on. It literally sometimes means taking 10 deep breaths instead of five, because if the five haven't worked, just take five more.
Yeah.
And believe you me, it does work. Find yourself a friend who makes you laugh. I think that's super important. A friend, a family member, somebody close. A sense of humor is so integral to being able to look at life through a lens of, oh, so this is what you've thrown at me now. Wow. And I thought I was done being tested. And I think for me, all my life circumstances really have brought me to a place, whether it's in terms of the personal learnings I've had, or the learnings I've had through my disability, or the learnings I've had at the workplace, is to be able to speak my truth and to find formats and platforms where I can share this with more people, knowing that maybe even one person who hears it may benefit. It may give that person the reason to persevere for just one more day, and maybe the next day is the day when things change for you.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that what I've achieved is great. I still myself am a work of progress, like we both just said. But I think in being able to find projects or places where my voice can matter, where I can mainstream issues faced by people with disability, where I can work on solutions that can make this a more accessible and uniform place for people with disabilities of any sort. And if I could have even helped make most sensitized workplaces be the norm really than an exception, or just be
Right.
something that people talk about, and actually help them understand how does one action this. I think that would be my contribution in the next few years as I look at it.
I think that's a lot. I mean, that's just one person making the world such a better place, and I thank
Well,
you.
in one little pocket, really.
I mean, you know, like which movie was it? Paid Forward. I think that every time, you know, you see a big grizzly bear cuddling their little baby cub, you know, there's that oxytocin in your own body that generates. And I'm sure that without you even knowing, you know, there would be people around you who see your story, maybe someone like me, and, you know, who would just see it and say, you know what, you know, there's a lesson there. And, you know, you spoke about, you know, your doctor at the time telling you something that kind of stayed in your psyche. And it just comes to me right now that I think a couple of years ago when I had my burnout in 3 years ago, you know, the doctor I had met at that time, he told me one thing which I think transformed uh, my experience of life, and that was, Sneh, build your sisterhood. You know, not that I wasn't, not that I didn't have female friends or anything like that, but then the word there, the functional word there is friends. And
Yes.
I think that building the sisterhood has meant that sometimes it's not necessary that I get to meet someone like you every day, but to know that there is someone that I can relate to, someone I can learn from, and someone whose story can add fuel to my fire when that's not as bright or it is doused, has been one of life's greatest lessons. So, thank you so much, Suranjana. I, for one, know that it's never easy to talk about things that have, you know, caused us trauma or caused us difficult times. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And I know of many women who are afraid to do that. But I applaud you, and I am so
Thank
proud
you.
of you being a sister of mine. And really, I wish you everything that is great to come out of anything that you have to do next.
Thank you so much, Sneh. It's been so good to be here, and congratulations to you for doing very, very important work through this and making this a part of your own journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.